Hello, my name is Jim O'Brien, and I'm here to talk today about data integration and the data architect's role in data integration and what kind of role data architecture plays in data integration. First of all, we're going to take a look at what does an architect do? What exactly kinds of artifacts do we produce? Then we need to take a look at what types of integration there are. There are different approaches to integration, and we produce different artifacts, and the artifacts are used differently depending on the approach that is chosen. Then we'll take a look at each type of integration and look at the specifics of the data architectural approach taken. And once we've done that, we can then spend a few minutes investigating which approach is best. Now, what does a data architect do? Primarily, what we do is we provide information about a data interface regarding its semantics, what do things mean, okay, and the structural organization. How is the data organized? Um, you know, what tables consist of which columns, what tables related to what, etc., so on and so forth. Another thing we do in a data integration effort is we provide transformation rules to transform the data from one format to the other. This is the essence of data integration. You typically have some type of data source and it has a specific format, and you want to take data from that source and move it to a target source which has usually a different format. And as part of doing this move, you have to transform the data from its source format into its target format. So let's take a look now at what types of integrations there are. Essentially, we're talking about two types of integration. We're talking about a point-to-point, or sometimes this is referred to as an end-to-end. And we're talking about a service-oriented integration. In a point-to-point integration, what you're doing is you are starting with a data interface and then going directly to another data interface. And at first glance, this seems to be fairly simple and straightforward, but let's see what happens as we add interfaces to the mix. Okay, with three interfaces, things are getting a little more complex because instead of one or two transformations, we now have three. When we add a fourth, you can see now that we are up to potentially 6 integrations. Now the actual number is determined by the number of interfaces. So here we can see it's n to the 2 minus n divided by 2 transformations in order to fully integrate. Have it set up where one interface in the mix can talk to all other interfaces. Now, let's contrast this with service-oriented integrations. In a service-oriented integration, you start with your source integration, or your source data point, rather, and you utilize what we refer to as a service layer. This is an engine, basically a data movement and transformation engine. And what you do is you go from your source and you transform it into a common structure, okay, that the service layer uses. Once you've got it in that structure, you then transform it from this common structure to the target format. Now, quite often this common structure is referred to as a canonical structure, and we'll talk more about that later. But for right now, let's look and see what happens as we add interfaces to the mix. So when we add a third, we have 3 sets of transformations. When we add a fourth, we have a fourth. And you can clearly see this is a lot less complex than a point-to-point. In fact, in order to fully integrate a set of n data interfaces, you only need n transformations. So what exactly is the approach? What do the data architects do? What do they produce? First of all, again, let's start with the point-to-point. Well, we start with the source data interface. And based on that, we develop a physical model that describes the organization of the data in that interface. And then with the physical model, we extend that and derive a logical model that gives us the meaning and understanding of that data organization or that set of data structures. Then we do the same thing for the target interface. Now, once we have those two in place, we can then use those models to develop transformation rules that describe the steps necessary to go from the source interface structure to the target interface structure. In a service-oriented, it's a little different, and there's a little more work, and we produce some different and additional artifacts. I mean, we start with the source interface and develop a physical and a logical model. And then we sit there and we take the logical model and use it to extend what is referred to as a common integration model. Now, the common integration model is the basis for the canonical model. So from that, we develop a canonical model. And typically, the canonical model is an XSD or a set of XSDs that is utilized by transformation rules to transform from and to a data interface format. We translate it from into the canonical format. And then we do the same thing for the target interface. Once we've done that, we can then use our transformation rules to describe how we're going to go from the source to the canonical format. And then from the canonical format, we take the transformation rules for the canonical to source and describe how we're going to transform it from the canonical into the target. Now you'll notice that in the physical, we had one set of transformation rules, two physical models, two logical models. Okay, that is 5 artifacts. Here we have 3, 6, 7 artifacts. Or rather, there are 8 artifacts. And so you can see we need to do a little more work with service-oriented. But in the long run, we actually end up doing less work thanks to the power of reuse. And let's go on and take a look at that. Which approach is best? Well, before you can answer that question, we need to look at the impact of changes in structure. Over time, data structures will change. New elements will be added. Old elements will be deprecated and deleted. The other thing you have to look at is the impact of changes in scale. And then once you've looked at those two things, then we can take a look at which approach is best. So let's see what happens when a structural change occurs in a point-to-point set of interfaces. So down here On the bottom right, let's say that that interface changes. Well, we can clearly see we've got to go and look at 3 impacted transformations. Okay, so every time we alter an interface, we've got a number of transformations to look at. Now, in the service layer, that's a little different. If I change an interface, I only have one transformation to deal with. Okay. Now let's take a look at changes in scale. What happens when we say changes in scale? We're saying what happens is we add more and more interfaces to the mix. Now, if you remember, okay, our formula for determining the number of interfaces to fully integrate, okay, was n squared minus n divided by 2. So here the blue curve shows us what happens and the amount of effort, the number of interfaces that we have to deal with as we add integrations to the mix. And as you see, it becomes quite sizable. At 50, you're looking at potentially, you're looking at 1,225 interfaces to fully integrate. Whereas here, we're just looking at 50 integrations to integrate. And it's a sizable difference in the level of effort. We can also look at this in terms of transformation operations. Transformation is where you go from one format to another. Okay, and again, we can sit there and see. Let's just look at 10. We can sit there and see we got 225 transformations under an end-to-end approach versus 50 under service oriented. And I'm sorry, when I described transformation operations, I was talking about the number of things we have to do and we have to deal with. And again, if you remember, when we looked at the artifacts and the number of things we had to do, we had to do 5 things with 5 artifacts under end to end. In service oriented, while we had 8 artifacts, some of them got reused, were used twice, specifically the common information model and the canonical model. And so we actually had 10 things that we needed to do with each interface versus 5 in the end-to-end integration. Now, the reason the blue is so much more is because, again, it's the number of integrations you have to deal with. So again, we can sit there and see that there's a sizable difference in the level of effort. And of course, let's also take a look at this from the view of dollars. If we assume 20 man hours per transformation operations, now this is analysis, design, coding, testing, and implementation. And some people would say that's kind of a low estimate, but let's be conservative here. And a fully burdened cost of $50 per man hour. That results in $1,000 per transformation operation. So again, we can sit there and see where we're spending significant amounts of money in end-to-end versus the amount you have to spend for service-oriented. Now, which is best? Well, I'm sure a number of you are saying, but we don't fully integrate, and that may be true. Your integration between all of your interfaces may be less than 100%. However, no matter what degree of integration you take, it won't be um, any more efficient or even as efficient as the service orientation, because the service orientation is the minimum number of integrations that need to take place. Okay, if I'm integrating four interfaces, I cannot integrate all four interfaces with less than four integrations. So even with it to be possible to only do four integrations in end to end and essentially miss the two, why would you want to do that? Because as you'll see, when you use service oriented, you automatically get fully integrated for the for less effort. So which is best? Okay. Now I did this and I looked at these metrics, and so unless we can say there's never more than three data interfaces to be integrated, the service oriented approach is the best because it costs less and requires less effort. And stop and think about it. Stop and think about those diagrams. When we had three in end to end, we had three integrations. When we had three interfaces in service oriented, we had three integrations. Now, anything above that, you're probably doing additional work in the end to end to achieve the same end. Okay. Hopefully, you found this informative, and if you have, feel free to comment on YouTube, or you can send your comments to me directly. If there are any other areas that you think I might be able to provide information on, please feel free to send those suggestions to me. Once again, I hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you very much.